The dust devil swirled across the main street of Prairie Creek, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of another scorching day. Sarah McKenna pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, despite the heat, as she watched her 7-year-old daughter Emma chase tumbleweeds behind the general store. The child's laughter rang out like silver bells against the harsh backdrop of their reality. They had been living in the abandoned lean-to behind Widow Henderson's boarding house for 3 weeks now, ever since the bank had taken their homestead. Sarah's calloused hands trembled as she counted the few coins in her worn leather pouch. 37 cents. Not enough for another night's lodging, barely enough for a loaf of day-old bread. Her husband Thomas had been dead 8 months now, taken by a fever that swept through the territory like wildfire, leaving her with nothing but debt and a daughter who still asked when Papa was coming home. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the weathered buildings of Prairie Creek in shades of amber and gold. Sarah had walked these streets for days, knocking on doors, asking for work, any work. Washing, cooking, mending, cleaning. But Prairie Creek was a small town, and opportunities were as scarce as water in a drought. The women who had work to offer already had help, and the men, well, they looked at her with eyes that held more than just sympathy, making her clutch Emma closer and walk faster down the dusty boardwalks. From where she sat on the steps of the abandoned building they called home, Sarah could see the sprawling Thornfield ranch in the distance, its green pastures a stark contrast to the brown hills surrounding the town. She had heard talk of Jacob Thornfield, the widowed rancher who ran the largest cattle operation in 3 counties. They said he was a fair man, that he treated his hands well and paid honest wages. They also said he had a daughter about Emma's age, a little girl who had lost her mother in childbirth and grew up wild as a Mustang on the open range. Sarah stood up, brushing the dust from her faded blue dress, the only dress she had left that wasn't patched beyond recognition. She had made a decision. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford, not when Emma's stomach growled through the night and her own strength was fading like morning mist. She would walk to Thornfield Ranch and ask for work, whatever work he had. She could cook, clean, tend cattle if necessary. She had grown up on a farm back in Missouri before marrying Thomas and following him west with dreams of their own land. "Emma," she called softly, and the little girl came running, her brown hair wild beneath a bonnet that had seen better days. "We're going to take a walk, sweetheart. A long walk to see about some work for Mama." Emma's green eyes, so much like her father's, sparkled with curiosity. "Where are we going, Mama?" "To the big ranch outside of town. Maybe we'll see some horses." Sarah forced a smile, taking her daughter's small hand in hers. The walk would take them the better part of 2 hours in this heat, but it was their only hope. The sun beat down mercilessly as Sarah and Emma made their way along the dusty trail that led to Thornfield Ranch. Sarah's worn boots raised small clouds of dust with each step, and sweat beaded on her forehead beneath the brim of her bonnet. Emma skipped alongside her for the first mile, but as the heat grew more oppressive, the little girl began to lag behind. Her small face flushed pink. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Emma whispered, tugging on Sarah's skirt. Sarah's heart clenched. She had brought no water, had nothing to offer except empty promises. "We'll be there soon, sweetheart. Maybe they'll have some cool water for us." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but hope was all she had left to give her daughter. As they crested a small hill, the Thornfield Ranch spread out before them like an oasis. The main house was a 2-story structure built of local stone and timber, with a wraparound porch that promised shade and rest. Corrals full of horses dotted the landscape, and cattle grazed in fields so green they seemed like something from a dream. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, its metal blades catching the sunlight like a beacon. But it was the sound that stopped Sarah in her tracks, the sound of a child crying, high and desperate, carried on the wind. Emma heard it too, her head tilting like a bird's as she listened. "Someone's hurt, Mama," Emma said, her tiredness forgotten. They hurried down the hill toward the ranch buildings, following the sound of distress. Behind the main barn, they found the source, a little girl with long blonde hair tangled with burrs and dirt, sitting beside a creek that ran behind the property. She was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, dressed in boys' clothes that were torn and muddy. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage wrapped around her left arm. "Oh, dear Lord," Sarah breathed, rushing forward and kneeling beside the child. "Sweetheart, what happened? Where are the grown-ups?" The girl looked up with eyes the color of storm clouds, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "I fell off lightning when we was chasing strays up in the north pasture. Papa's out with the hands looking for me. But I can't walk on this ankle, and my arm won't stop bleeding. Sarah's motherly instincts took over, years of tending to Thomas's ranch hand's injuries flooding back. She examined the girl's arm with gentle hands, noting the deep gash that would need proper cleaning and stitching. The ankle was swollen but probably not broken. "Emma, sweetheart, can you go to that creek and wet your petticoat hem for me? We need to clean this wound." Sarah's voice was calm and sure, the voice of a woman who had faced crisis before. As Emma ran to the creek, Sarah turned back to the injured girl. "What's your name, honey?" "Lucy," the girl sniffled. "Lucy Thornfield. Are you the doctor?" "Papa said he sent for the doctor from Millerville." Sarah's breath caught. This was Jacob Thornfield's daughter, the wild child she had heard about in town. "No, sweetheart, I'm not the doctor, but I've tended plenty of wounds in my time. My name is Sarah McKenna, and that's my daughter Emma. We're going to take good care of you until your papa gets back." Sarah worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning Lucy's wound with creek water and tearing strips from her own petticoat to make proper bandages. Emma sat beside them, holding Lucy's uninjured hand and chattering softly about the horses they had seen on the way to the ranch, doing her best to distract the older girl from the pain. "There," Sarah said finally, tying off the last bandage. "That should hold until the doctor arrives. The cut's deep, but it's clean now. You'll have a scar to show off to the boys." Lucy managed a weak smile. "Papa says scars are just stories written on your skin. He's got one on his chest from a longhorn that didn't want to be branded." The sound of thundering hooves echoed across the pasture, and Sarah looked up to see a group of riders approaching fast. In the lead was a man mounted on a black stallion, his hat pulled low against the sun. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his posture, the way he sat the horse like he was born to it. This had to be Jacob Thornfield. As the riders drew closer, Sarah could make out more details. Jacob Thornfield was a tall man, broad-shouldered and lean, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years under the open sky. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples, and when he dismounted and ran toward them, she could see eyes the same storm gray as his daughter's, filled with fear and desperate love. "Lucy, dear God, Lucy." He dropped to his knees beside his daughter, his big hands hovering over her as if he was afraid to touch her and cause more harm. "We've been searching for hours." I thought his voice broke, and Sarah saw the raw terror of a father who had nearly lost his child. "Papa, I'm okay," Lucy said, her voice stronger now. "This lady fixed me up real good. Her name's Mrs. McKenna, and that's Emma. Emma's my age, and she's been keeping me company." Jacob's eyes met Sarah's then, and she felt something shift in the air between them, recognition of a shared understanding of what it meant to be responsible for a precious life, to live with the constant fear of loss. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you." The way she was bleeding when she fell. He swallowed hard, looking back at his daughter. "Doc Peterson is on his way from Millerville, but she might have." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Any mother would have done the same," Sarah said softly. "She's a brave girl. Didn't cry once while I cleaned the wound." Jacob studied Sarah's face, taking in the worn but clean dress, the careful mending of her shawl, the gentle way she had wrapped his daughter's arm. His gaze moved to Emma, who was still holding Lucy's hand and singing a soft lullaby their mother had taught her. "You walked here from town," he said, not a question but a statement. His eyes had caught the dust on their clothes, the way Sarah's boots were worn thin at the soles. Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "Yes, sir. I came to ask about work, any work you might have." There was no shame in her voice, only quiet dignity. One of the ranch hands, a grizzled man with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Boss, we should get Miss Lucy back to the house before the doc arrives." Jacob nodded, then looked back at Sarah. "Mom, you and your daughter will come back to the house with us. Lucy needs proper tending, and it's the least I can do after what you've done for us. We'll get you both some food and water, and then we'll talk about that work you mentioned." The Thornfield ranch house was even more impressive up close than it had appeared from the hill. The stone foundation was solid as a mountain, and the timber frame spoke of craftsmanship that would last generations. Jacob carried Lucy up the front steps and through the wide oak door, Sarah and Emma following close behind. Inside, the house was cool and spacious, with high ceilings and windows that let in streams of golden light. But despite its size and obvious quality, there was something missing the touch of a woman's hand. The furniture was sturdy but sparse, Dishes were stacked haphazardly on shelves, and dust motes danced in the sunbeams. It was the home of a man and child who were surviving, not truly living. "Rosa," Jacob called out as he settled Lucy on a large sofa in the front room. "Rosa, I need you." An elderly Mexican woman appeared from what Sarah assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. Her face was lined with worry until she saw Lucy safe in her father's arms. "Ay, Dios mío, ¿qué pasó con mi niña?" She rushed forward, her hands fluttering over Lucy like a mother bird. She took a tumble, chasing strays. "This lady here, Mrs. McKenna, she patched her up real good until the doc can get here." Jacob's voice held a respect that made Sarah's cheeks warm. "Rosa, can you get some food and cool water for Mrs. McKenna and her daughter? They walked all the way out here from town in this heat." Rosa's dark eyes took in Sarah and Emma with the quick assessment of a woman who had raised children and understood need when she saw it. See, of course. "Come, pequeña," she said to Emma. "You look ready to fall over. And you, senora, you sit. I bring food." Emma hesitated, looking to her mother for permission. Sarah nodded, and the little girl followed Rosa toward the kitchen, drawn by the promise of food and the gentle warmth in the older woman's voice. Jacob knelt beside the sofa where Lucy lay, brushing her tangled hair away from her face. "How you feeling, little bit?" "Better, Papa. My arm doesn't hurt so much now that it's all cleaned up." And Emma told me stories about Missouri, where she used to live before her papa went to heaven. Lucy's matter-of-fact way of speaking about death made Jacob's eyes flick to Sarah with new understanding. "Your husband passed?" he asked quietly. 8 months ago. Fever took him quick." Sarah's voice was steady, but Jacob could hear the grief beneath it that time had dulled but not erased. "We lost the homestead after that. Couldn't keep up with the payments." Jacob nodded, understanding more than she knew. His own wife had died 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Lucy with only Rosa's help and his own fumbling attempts at fatherhood. He knew the weight of loss, the way it changed the very air you breathed. The sound of an approaching buggy announced the doctor's arrival. Dr. Peterson was a kindly man in his 60s, who had been tending the people of the territory for more than 20 years. He examined Lucy's arm with careful hands, nodding approvingly at Sarah's work. "Couldn't have done better myself, ma'am," he told Sarah. "Clean bandaging, proper wound care. You have experience with this kind of thing? I helped tend my husband's ranch hands when they got hurt. You learn to make do when the nearest doctor is 2 days' ride away." Sarah watched as Dr. Peterson put in 3 neat stitches to close the deepest part of the cut. "Well, you likely saved this young lady from infection. Maybe worse. The ankle's just a sprain, keep off it for a few days, and she'll be good as new." The doctor packed up his instruments and accepted Jacob's payment with a tip of his hat. After the doctor left, an awkward silence settled over the room. Sarah knew she should ask about work opportunities and be on her way, but something in Jacob's manner suggested he had something on his mind. Rosa returned from the kitchen with Emma in tow, both of them smiling. Emma's face was clean, and she was clutching a sugar cookie in each hand. "Mama, look. Senora Rosa gave me cookies, and she showed me how to make tortillas." "Mrs. McKenna," Jacob said, his voice careful and formal. "I wonder if I might speak with you privately. Lucy, you rest here with Emma and Rosa. We'll be right outside on the porch." Sarah followed Jacob through the front door and out onto the wide porch. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. From here, she could see the entire scope of the ranch, the pastures, the outbuildings, the corrals full of horses. It was beautiful and prosperous, everything she and Thomas had dreamed their own place might become. Jacob leaned against the porch railing, his hat in his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at his land. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I owe you more than I can repay, Mrs. McKenna. If you hadn't found Lucy when you did." He shook his head. "But beyond that, watching you with her today, seeing how gentle you were, how capable, it got me thinking about something I've been wrestling with for months." Sarah waited, unsure where this conversation was leading. "Lucy needs a mother," Jacob continued, his words measured and careful. "Not just someone to cook and clean, Rosa does that just fine, but someone to teach her how to be a lady, to braid her hair and tell her stories, to love her the way only a mother can. And Emma," he looked directly at Sarah then, "Emma needs a father, someone to provide for her, to protect her, to give her the kind of life every child deserves." Sarah's breath caught as she began to understand what he was suggesting. I'm not talking about a marriage of convenience or some business arrangement, Jacob said quickly. I've seen how you are with children, both mine and your own. And I've seen the strength in you. The way you've kept going despite everything life has thrown at you. That kind of strength, that kind of heart. A man would be lucky to have that in his life. He turned to face her fully, his storm-gray eyes intense and sincere. I know this is sudden, and I know we barely know each other. But sometimes life presents us with opportunities that make sense in ways we can't explain. Your daughter needs a home. My daughter needs a mother. Maybe we can help each other. Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. A marriage proposal. From a man she had met just hours ago. It should have been absurd, impossible to consider. But as she looked out over the prosperous ranch, thought about Emma's hungry belly and their uncertain future, she found herself considering it more seriously than she would have believed possible. Mr. Thornfield, she said slowly. Are you asking me to marry you? I am, he said simply. Not for love, I won't lie to you about that. I cared deeply for my first wife, and I know you loved your husband. But for partnership, for the children, for the chance to build something good together. Love. He paused. Love might come in time, if we're both open to it. Or it might not, but respect, friendship, shared purpose, those are foundations strong enough to build a life on. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the porch railing. It was practical, what he was suggesting, logical, even, but it was also terrifying. To tie her life to a stranger, no matter how decent he seemed. I need time to think, she whispered. Of course, Jacob said. Stay the night, both of you. We have plenty of room, and Lucy would love the company. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, he used her first name for the first time, and something in his voice made her look at him again. I want you to know that whatever you decide, you and Emma will never go hungry again. If you choose not to marry me, I'll still find work for you here, or I'll help you get established somewhere else. I won't let you and that little girl go back to living in that lean-to behind the boarding house. That evening, after a dinner of beef stew and fresh bread that was the finest meal Emma had eaten in months, Sarah found herself sitting on Lucy's bed, listening as the two girls chattered like old friends. Lucy had insisted that Emma sleep in her room, and now both children were curled up under a patchwork quilt, their voices growing soft and drowsy in the lamplight. Emma, Lucy was saying, if your mama marries my papa, we'd be sisters. Real sisters. I always wanted a sister. Emma's eyes were bright with excitement. And we'd live here always? With the horses and everything? Always and always, Lucy confirmed solemnly. And Papa would teach you to ride, and Senora Rosa would make us cookies whenever we wanted. Sarah's heart ached as she listened to her daughter's innocent hope. Emma had lost so much: her father, her home, her security. The idea of a stable life, of a father figure and a sister, was like a fairy tale to the little girl. After the children fell asleep, Sarah made her way downstairs to find Jacob sitting in his study, account book spread before him on a massive oak desk. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep? He asked gently. Too much to think about. Sarah stepped into the room, noting the leather-bound books lining the walls, the maps of cattle drives and territorial boundaries. This was a man who had built something substantial, something lasting. I have questions, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Jacob closed the account book and gave her his full attention. If I were to say yes, what would you expect from me? What would this marriage look like day to day? Jacob leaned back in his chair, considering. I'd expect you to be Emma's mother and Lucy's stepmother. I'd expect you to help run the household, though Rosa will always be here to help with the cooking and heavier work. I'd expect partnership in making decisions about the children, about the ranch, when it affects our family. And I'd expect fidelity, honesty, and respect. And what could I expect from you? Everything I just mentioned. From my end. You'd be my partner, not my servant. Your opinions would matter to me. Emma would be my daughter in every way that counts. I'd provide for her, protect her, love her as I do Lucy. And I'd never raise a hand to either of you in anger. My father was a harsh man, and I swore I'd never be that kind of husband or father. Sarah studied his face in the lamplight, looking for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She found only sincerity and a bone-deep weariness that matched her own. There's something you should know about me, she said quietly. I wasn't raised to be a ranch wife. I grew up on a small farm in Missouri, But this, she gestured toward the window, toward the vast expanse of his holdings. This is bigger than anything I've ever managed. Rosa can teach you anything you need to know about running a house this size. And the rest, the social expectations, the business dinners, the territorial politics, we'll face that together. You're smart, Sarah. I can see it in your eyes. You'll learn what you need to learn. They talked until well past midnight, covering practical matters like sleeping arrangements, separate bedrooms until and unless they both decided otherwise, and the children's education. Jacob promised to hire a tutor from back east to ensure both girls received proper schooling. He spoke about his plans for expanding the ranch, his hope to establish a horse breeding program alongside the cattle operation. As the conversation wound down, Sarah found herself asking, "What was she like? Your wife?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Catherine was delicate, beautiful, refined, but not built for this life. She came west because she loved me, but she never really adapted. The isolation wore on her, the harsh winters, the constant worry about Indian raids or cattle rustlers. When Lucy was born, he stopped, unable to continue. "I'm not delicate," Sarah said softly, "and I'm not afraid of hard work or harsh weather. I've already lost everything once. I'm not likely to break easily." Jacob's eyes met hers, and she saw something like relief in their depths. "No," he said, "I don't think you are." Sarah woke before dawn, a habit ingrained from years of ranch life with Thomas. The house was quiet, but she could smell coffee brewing in the kitchen. She dressed quietly and made her way downstairs. Following the scent, she found Rosa already at work, kneading dough for the day's bread. The older woman looked up with a gentle smile. "Buenos dias, señora. You are an early riser, like me. I've never been able to sleep past sunrise," Sarah admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Rosa poured for her. "It smells wonderful. Señor Jacob, he is already out checking the horses. Always he is up before the sun." Rosa continued her kneading, but Sarah could feel the woman's eyes on her, assessing. "The niñas, they sleep like angels. It is good for Miss Lucy to have a friend." Sarah sipped her coffee, gathering courage for the question she needed to ask. "Rosa, you've been here a long time?" "See, since before Miss Lucy was born. I came when Señor Jacob married the first señora. She was not happy here. Very sad lady, always crying for her mama in Boston. But you," Rosa paused in her work, studying Sarah's face. "You are different, stronger. The children seem to get along well," Sarah said carefully. "I see. Like sisters already. And Miss Lucy, she needs this. She is growing wild without a mother to guide her. Señor Jacob, he tries, but a father cannot teach a girl to be a woman." Rosa shaped the dough into loaves, her movements practiced and sure. "You would be good for them. Both of them. The house. It has been empty of woman's laughter too long." Through the kitchen window, Sarah could see Jacob walking toward the barn, his stride confident and purposeful. In the early morning light, she could better appreciate the scope of his operation. Corrals full of horses, cattle dotting the distant pastures, several outbuildings that spoke of prosperity and good management. "Rosa," Sarah said slowly, "if I were to marry Mr. Thornfield, would you stay? I wouldn't want to take your place in the kitchen, or with Lucy." Rosa's weathered face broke into a warm smile. "Ay, señora, you do not understand. I am an old woman. I have raised my own children, helped raise Miss Lucy. But there is room for two women in this house, especially when one has a mother's heart and the other has a grandmother's wisdom. We would work together." "See?" The sound of small feet on the stairs announced the children's awakening. Emma appeared first, her hair tousled from sleep, followed closely by Lucy limping slightly on her sprained ankle but otherwise looking much improved. "Mama!" Emma ran to Sarah, climbing onto her lap for morning cuddles. "Lucy showed me her music box, and it has a little dancing lady inside. And Emma taught me a song her papa used to sing," Lucy added, settling at the kitchen table. "About a mockingbird." Sarah held Emma close, breathing in the sweet scent of her daughter's hair. This could be their life morning coffee with Rosa. Children's laughter filling the rooms. The security of knowing they belonged somewhere. Jacob appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hat in his hands, and his dark hair slightly mussed from the morning breeze. "Morning, ladies. How's the ankle, Lucy girl?" "Much better, Papa. Emma and I are going to show the new foals to each other after breakfast." "Not until Dr. Peterson says you can walk that far," Jacob said firmly, but with a smile that softened the words. His eyes found Sarah's over Emma's head, Did you sleep well? Well enough, Sarah replied, aware that Rosa and the children were listening to every word, probably reading more into the conversation than was actually there. After breakfast, Jacob asked Sarah to walk with him again, this time toward the horse corrals. Emma and Lucy begged to come along, so they made their way as a group across the yard, the children chattering excitedly about the horses. That's Lightning, Lucy said, pointing to a spirited bay gelding in the nearest corral. The one that threw me yesterday. Papa says he's got too much fire, but I like riding him anyway. You'll stick to Buttercup from now on, young lady, Jacob said sternly. At least until you're a better rider. Emma pressed close to the rail fence, her eyes wide as she watched the horses. Sarah noticed Jacob watching her daughter's reaction with interest. You like horses, Emma? He asked. I never seen so many before, Emma whispered. Are they all yours? They are. And if your mama agrees to my proposal, they'd be yours too, in a way. Would you like that? Emma's face lit up like the sunrise. Mama, can we stay? Please? Lucy said we could be sisters, and Mr. Jacob could be my papa like Papa was, and we could live here always. The innocent words from Emma's mouth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The longing in her daughter's voice, the hope in her green eyes, it was almost too much to bear. This child, who had lost so much already, was ready to embrace a new family with the resilience that only children possessed. Emma, sweetheart, Sarah said gently, kneeling down to her daughter's level. These are big decisions that grown-ups have to make carefully. Mr. Jacob has been very kind to offer, but what, Mama? Emma's lower lip trembled. Don't you like it here? Don't you like Mr. Jacob and Lucy? Jacob stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. Emma, your mama needs time to think about what's best for both of you. That's what good mothers do, they think carefully about important decisions. He looked at Sarah with understanding in his storm-gray eyes. Why don't you girls go sit on the porch with Rosa while your mama and I take a walk down to the creek? Lucy took Emma's hand immediately. Come on, Emma. Rosa said she'd teach us to make candy pulls this morning if we're good. As the children walked away, Emma glanced back over her shoulder with a look that pierced Sarah's heart. The little girl was trying so hard to be brave, but Sarah could see the fear underneath the fear that they might have to leave this paradise and return to their uncertain existence in town. Jacob led Sarah down a well-worn path toward the creek, where they had first found Lucy the day before. The morning air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of sage and wildflowers. Birds called to each other from the cottonwoods that lined the water, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly as they grazed. I know this is overwhelming, Jacob said as they reached the creek bank. Yesterday you were worried about your next meal, and today, I'm asking you to consider marriage to a virtual stranger. I won't blame you if you think I'm out of my mind. Sarah sat down on a large rock beside the water, her hands folded in her lap. Are you out of your mind, Mr. Thornfield? He smiled at that, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less careworn. Probably. But I've learned that sometimes the most important decisions in life have to be made with the heart rather than the head, and your heart is telling you to marry a woman you met yesterday? Jacob sat down beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. My heart is telling me that you're the first person in 3 years who has made my house feel like a home. My heart is telling me that Lucy smiled more yesterday afternoon than she has in months. And my heart is telling me that Emma deserves better than the uncertainty you've been living with. Sarah watched the creek flow past, its gentle babbling a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil in her mind. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of me? Of making another mistake? Of trusting the wrong person? Of putting Emma through more upheaval if this doesn't work out? She turned to look at him directly. What if we don't suit? What if you decide you've made a terrible error in judgment? What if I can't be the kind of wife you need? Jacob was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. Sarah, I can't promise we won't have disagreements or difficult times. No marriage comes without challenges. But I can promise you this, I will never abandon you or Emma. Whatever happens between us, you would always have a place here, always be provided for. I'm not the kind of man who goes back on his word, and if love never comes, what if we remain simply partners in raising children? Then we'll be partners, Jacob said simply. I had love once, Sarah, real, passionate, all-consuming love, and when I lost Catherine, I thought that part of my life was over forever. I'm not looking to replace what we had, that would be impossible. But I am looking for something different, something built on mutual respect and shared goals. Maybe that's enough. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing to the water's edge. This is insane. People don't make decisions like this based on one day of knowing each other, don't they? Jacob remained seated, his voice calm and reasonable. My grandfather met my grandmother when her wagon train was attacked by Comanche. He fought off the raiders and brought her back to his homestead to recover. They were married 2 weeks later and had 52 years together. Sometimes circumstances push us into situations where the normal rules don't apply, and sometimes people make hasty decisions they regret for the rest of their lives. Sarah countered. True. Jacob stood and walked to stand beside her. But sometimes they make decisions that save their lives and the lives of their children. Sarah, you walked out here yesterday to ask for work. Any work. You were willing to do whatever it took to provide for Emma. How is this so different? Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Because I'm not just risking my own future anymore. I'm risking Emma's, Doc, and Lucy's, and yours, and yours. Jacob was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Sarah, look at me. She turned to face him, and he reached out gently to brush a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I believe in you, he said simply. I believe you're strong enough to build a life here, wise enough to help me raise our daughters, and brave enough to take this chance. The question is, do you believe it too? Sarah looked into Jacob's eyes and saw something that took her breath away, absolute certainty. Not arrogance or blind optimism, but the quiet confidence of a man who had made his decision and would stand by it regardless of the consequences. It was the same look Thomas had worn when he asked her to marry him and come west, the look that had convinced her to leave everything familiar and follow him into an uncertain future. But Thomas had offered her love along with adventure. Jacob was offering something entirely different. Security, partnership, a chance to build something lasting. Was it enough? I need to ask you something, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. If we do this, if I say yes, will you promise to be patient with me? I haven't. Since Thomas died, I haven't been able to imagine sharing my life with another man. The thought of being a wife again, in all the ways that means. Jacob's expression grew gentle and understanding. Sarah, we don't have to figure out everything about our marriage on the first day, or the first month, or even the first year. We'll take things as they come, at whatever pace feels right to both of us. I'm not marrying you to have a woman in my bed. I'm marrying you to have a partner in life. Everything else can wait until you're ready. If you're ever ready. The relief that flooded through Sarah was so intense it made her knees weak. Here was a man who understood that trust had to be earned, that intimacy couldn't be demanded or rushed. Thomas had been her first and only love, and the thought of opening her heart to someone else felt like betraying his memory. There's something else, she said, steeling herself for honesty. I may never love you the way I loved Thomas. He was everything to me. My first love, my best friend, the father of my child. I don't know if I have that kind of love left to give to anyone else. Jacob nodded slowly. I understand. And I'll never ask you to forget him or pretend he didn't matter. Emma should know about her real father, should hear stories about him, should understand that she was created out of love. And Thomas will always be part of our family, even if he's not physically here. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of guilt and fear she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. You would do that? You wouldn't be jealous or resentful? Sarah, I'm asking you to help me raise a daughter who isn't yours biologically. How could I resent you for honoring the memory of Emma's father? We're both bringing our histories to this marriage. That's not a weakness, it's what makes us who we are. They stood together in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the creek flow past and listening to the sounds of the ranch awakening fully to the day. In the distance, Sarah could hear the children's laughter mixing with Rosa's gentle voice, and she realized that this place already felt more like home than anywhere she'd been since losing the homestead. If I say yes, she said finally, when would this happen? As soon as you want. There's a circuit preacher who comes through Prairie Creek once a month. He's due back next week. Or we could ride into Millerville and find a justice of the peace, if you prefer something sooner. Jacob paused, studying her face. Have you decided, Sarah? Sarah closed her eyes and tried to imagine riding back to town with Emma, returning to the lean-to behind the boarding house, continuing their hand-to-mouth existence while she searched for work that might not exist. Then she tried to imagine staying here, watching Emma bloom under the security of a real home, helping Lucy grow from a wild child into a young woman, working alongside Jacob to build something lasting. When she opened her eyes, Jacob was watching her with patient understanding, willing to accept whatever decision she made. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jacob's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He didn't try to embrace her or seal their agreement with a kiss, but simply reached out and took her hand in his, squeezing gently. "Thank you," he said simply. "You won't regret this, Sarah. I swear to you, you won't regret this." As they walked back toward the house hand in hand, Sarah felt a mix of terror and hope that reminded her of the day she and Thomas had first seen their homestead. The fear of the unknown balanced against the excitement of new possibilities. Maybe this was how all the important changes in life felt, like standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump, trusting that you would learn to fly on the way down. The wedding took place the following Sunday in the parlor of the Thornfield ranch house. The circuit preacher, Reverend Matthews, was a kind man with gentle eyes who asked no uncomfortable questions about the speed of the courtship. Rosa had spent the week preparing a feast, and several neighboring ranchers and their wives had come to witness the ceremony and celebrate afterward. Sarah wore a dress that had belonged to Jacob's first wife, a simple but elegant blue silk that Rosa had altered to fit her smaller frame. Lucy had woven wildflowers into Sarah's hair, and Emma stood beside her as her only attendant, clutching a bouquet of prairie roses and grinning so widely it seemed her face might split. Jacob stood tall and handsome in his best suit, his usually windswept hair neatly combed, his storm-gray eyes never leaving Sarah's face as they spoke their vows. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed Sarah gently on the forehead, a gesture of respect rather than passion, but somehow more meaningful for its restraint. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Thornfield," he whispered, and Sarah felt the last of her reservations melt away. She was no longer Sarah McKenna, the desperate widow with an uncertain future. She was Sarah Thornfield, wife and mother, partner in building something lasting. The celebration that followed was warm and boisterous, with fiddle music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Sarah found herself welcomed by the neighboring wives with genuine warmth, and she began to understand that in this harsh country, people didn't judge each other by the speed of their courtships but by their character and their willingness to work hard for their families. Emma and Lucy were inseparable, already calling each other sister and making elaborate plans for all the adventures they would have together. Watching them, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't experienced since Thomas's death, the peace of knowing her daughter would grow up secure and loved. As the last of the guests departed and the house grew quiet, Sarah found herself standing in the kitchen with Rosa, cleaning the last of the dishes while Jacob and the girls sat by the fire in the parlor, Lucy reading aloud from one of her favorite books. "Señora," Rosa said quietly, "you have made this house whole again. Señor Jacob, he has been like a man walking in his sleep for 3 years. Today, he wakes up." Sarah looked through the doorway at her new husband, seeing him laugh at something Lucy was reading, watching as he pulled Emma onto his lap when she grew sleepy. In 1 week, their lives had been completely transformed. 2 broken families had become one complete one. 6 months later, as Sarah stood on the porch watching Jacob teach both girls to rope cattle in the north pasture, she realized something had changed in her heart as well. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love she had shared with Thomas that would always be unique and irreplaceable, but it was love nonetheless, built on daily kindnesses, shared laughter, mutual respect, and the deep satisfaction of building a life together. When Jacob caught her watching and waved, his face splitting into that transformative smile she had grown to love, Sarah waved back and touched her still flat belly, where their first child together was just beginning to grow. She hadn't told him yet, wanted to be sure before raising hopes, but soon she would give him the news that their family would continue to expand. That evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma curled up asleep in Jacob's lap and Lucy leaning against Sarah's shoulder, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important journeys began with a single desperate step into the unknown. She had walked to this ranch looking for work, and she had found a family, a future, and a love deeper and more lasting than she had ever dared to hope for. "Thank you," she said quietly to Jacob, who reached over to take her hand in his free one. "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. For giving Emma a father and Lucy a mother. For building this life with me." Jacob squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for saying yes when a sane woman would have run for the hills. Thank you for making our house a home." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss, the struggle, The desperate walk across the prairie with nothing but hope and determination. Every hardship had been leading to this moment, this place, this family. Sometimes the heart of your future was hidden in the most unlikely places, waiting for you to be brave enough to reach out and claim it. The wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers across the prairie, and in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. This was home now, and Sarah Thornfield was finally, truly, completely at peace.